everyone, and welcome to another session of Mita's Deep Dive series brought to you by 420 Collections. 420 Collections has 420 skincare and 420 medibles that are available in dispensaries throughout the great state of Arizona. And today we have some individuals from Headset, and we're going to be talking about data, deep dive into data and how data is going to shape and drive your decisions. So we're in a world today where data is everywhere. Data is driving everything. Cannabis is no different. There are some unique aspects to the cannabis industry for those that do not have any experience. That what we're going to do here today is give you a great overview of here are the things that you need to know and maybe help to identify some things that you don't know that you need to know. So, all right. So I want to go ahead and introduce our panelist here today. So we'll start with Mr. Joe Cullen. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe. I am a customer success manager with Headset. Been with the company for about 2.5 years now, just working with retailers on a day-to-day basis, just to help them get the most value out of the tool and better understand the power of data. I came to Headset 2.5 years ago from a teaching job. So I'm kind of used to, I taught middle school. Didn't really love that, but I really like working with cannabis folks and teaching them how to leverage the power of data. But yeah, excited to be here today with you guys.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, and a big change from teaching middle school to being in cannabis data. So that's awesome.
Definitely.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead, Mr. Russ Powder.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much, Caleb. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Russ. I am on the retailer team here at Headset. Russ Powder's full name. I work with all our Arizona partners on the retail side. So my background, I grew up on the East Coast, moved to the West Coast to be more involved in cannabis when it wasn't really too much allowed where I was. Worked as a bud tender in a dispensary in San Francisco, went on to work in their cultivation for a while, and then moved back to the East Coast when Maryland Medical opened up, and worked in post-harvest and sales fulfillment for a grow and lab out there. I've been with Headset a little bit, I think I started just after Joe. So I've been with Headset about 2.5 years as well. And yeah, excited to be here and share what I can with everyone to, those looking to get started in the industry. I've been in it for a while now, so always excited to talk about this. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Thank you, Russ. And yeah, you're going to give some great perspective with that experience that you've had throughout the vertical. And I'm sure that definitely helped tie into the resources and the services that you're providing for your customers now, of having that firsthand experience. There isn't anything quite like firsthand experience.
Yeah, definitely. Every state's different, but it's been great to see all the rapid change in the state. It's been awesome.
Yep, definitely. Exciting times. All right. And Miss Jocelyn Sheltra.
What is happening, everyone? I'm our Director of Industry Relations at Headset. And really what that means is I'm out in market, working across North America and educating retailers, brands, investors, associations, policymakers, anyone really about what we're doing at Headset and how to incorporate the data into their strategies. A lot of what we're doing, this is so new for the cannabis industry, and per your kind of opening, Caleb, this is not new for other industries, but because this is new for a lot of us, especially people that have been working in the industry for a really long time, we need people like Joe who can explain things really well with his teaching credentials, people like Russ who have that firsthand experience. And so I'm just out in market kind of talking about what we're doing. And for my background, so right after graduating college, I grew up down in Orange County, Southern California. And one of my first real jobs out of school was working with all these app developers the year the iPhone came out. And so that kind of experience of working in an industry that was like year one of this industry emerging. And also it was a very wild west of an industry, not nearly as wild west of an industry as cannabis. But it required this kind of skill set, this mentality of being able to adapt with a lot of changes, whether it's within regulations, whether it's just the nuances of how that business is run. And so I was working on the ad tech side, and so doing a lot of marketing campaigns for all these app developers. And within ad tech and how all of these ads that we see at any advertisement you get on your phone or now on TV, what you call programmatic TV, there's a supply chain within that too. And so the way that the supply chain operates within that industry, there's still so many parallels in what we're doing in cannabis. And so I'm just excited to kind of bring in that skill set using data for all those app developers that were very earlier in their business, and more so just the mindset of how do we grow together as an industry? How do we kind of bind our supply chain when we're at this, new of a stage of our industry, though maturing very quickly. So happy to talk about everything that I've been learning at Headset over the last 3 years, and then bring in some of that skill set and knowledge as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jocelyn. And thank you. I think we got a great panel here that shows the wealth of resources that Headset can provide. And I think it's really important to hear you saw that there's a lot of different paths that can get there. And this is a great opportunity to talk about one of those of if really being passionate about data and being able to provide information to customers to help them to make better decisions. So I think that's a great sort of segue into some of the topics that we want to touch on today, which is, data ultimately it paints the picture of your company's story and your company's health. So what are some ways, some suggestions of how you can improve those data reading skills?
So I'll kind of kick this off. One of the things that we talk about a lot at Headset, it's understanding different frameworks for how data is analyzed. And so there's one specific framework or principle that we talk about a lot that I'm going to use this as like a base example here, that we call the 80-20 rule, or it's commonly known as the Pareto principle. And this principle really came about from an Italian economist in the early 1900s named Vilfredo Pareto. And he had this theory, this idea that most of the wealth in Italy was owned by 20% of people. And so he came to this conclusion that around 20% of actions are going to contribute to 80% of results. And so I'm using this as an example because there's a lot of these frameworks, especially when we're talking about analysis within a retailer or within a brand or a cultivator. What we want to do is understand these different frameworks of how we should be looking at data, how we should be thinking about data, and then really think about how that applies to us in cannabis. So when we're using this Pareto principle as an example, coming from Headset's perspective, given that we're working with so many retailers, one of the things that we try to educate people on is, hey, when we know this principle is actually applicable to our everyday lives, but just speaking to cannabis, in general, what we're finding is that if you go into a retail store, or retailers, when they're looking at their inventory, it's generally going to be around 20% of their products are going to be contributing to 80% of their revenue. So when we know this framework, then this is really easy to then apply that into your inventory strategy, to apply it into your marketing campaigns and kind of where you're spending your advertising dollars. Your employees, right? 20% of your employees are going to contribute to 80% of your sales. This is a common theory. So that's just one example. There's many other examples that I think people should be thinking about as well. I'll just reference one more called, that we talk about a lot, called the consumer paradox of choice. And what this is this was a really interesting study in which it was a study of jams, of jellies. And so I think these analysts, people who were trying to theorize how do people make decisions about what they purchase, what they did is they went in and they did this A/B test or this study in grocery stores where they took I think it was 16 or 36 different jellies, and they had a stand and they wanted to see how many people would purchase when it's a lot of different jellies. Mm-hmm. Then they had another time, they had 5 or 6 different jellies. And so what they wanted to know is if there's too many choices, are people less apt to purchase? And what they ended up finding from this is that it was in fact true that with less jellies that they were selling, people purchased more, and then they ended up a lot happier with their purchases. And I think we see this a lot. Our analysts give this great example of like going into a cheesecake factory and seeing how big that menu is versus going into an In-N-Out. It's a big difference in kind of the psychology of how we think about purchasing and then how satisfied we are with that purchase. So those frameworks, the understanding of psychology and how people like to purchase, those are really important in my opinion, before you even kind of get into what it is that you're wanting to analyze from all the data.
Yep. No, I think that that's a great point that you make there of there's so many different, there's only so much time in the day, and we have to think about our own internal bandwidth. And it's whack-a-mole unless you are taking a step back to really think about, all right, what is it that's driving my business? What should I be looking at, rather than just saying, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. So I think that's a great principle. And I've definitely heard that about the consumer paradox as well too. I know with my stores, I looked at having right at about 16 strains on the shelf. I found that was the sweet spot. Anything over than that, people got that deer in the headlights look. Anything less than 10, then you start seeing like, oh, well, you don't have enough choice, and they start thinking you don't have enough inventory. So that's a perfect example of that in action, that I saw that was how product moved quicker. So love it. So tying into that, we're in a retail operation. What are some important metrics for you to track from the retail perspective?
Yeah, I can go in a little bit more detail into this, Caleb. So there's a lot of key performance indicators, or KPIs, that retailers are going to want to look at. And I'm sure, some of the finance folks will have some different KPIs that they'll be looking at. But just to go into some of the main things that you really want to start thinking about, especially for folks who are in the stage that folks who will be checking out these videos are watching, and you're really thinking about getting in and opening up a new store. Some things that you're going to want to think about, for instance, is transaction volume in your state and area. That way, you can understand how many transactions are reasonable to expect in a given month. And that can start to help form those top line numbers that you're going to need in the very beginning of your journey of opening up a store. Another good one, basket sizes. So as more data pours in, you'll be able to understand, for instance, the medium basket size, 25th percentile basket size, 75th percentile basket size. And the reason you want to know this is it'll help folks who are opening up a new store know kind of the range you can expect to see. Things like average item price, items per basket, that'll help you determine, what a typical shopping experience will be at your store. And then especially in Arizona, as adult use takes off and more sales come from it, really kind of tracking and understanding total market growth, and then also your store growth. So you can see, how are we doing compared to the market? When the market takes a hit, is that okay? We're taking the hit. Understanding how you compare as more licenses come online is also going to be very important. One more thing, kind of tying back into what I said earlier, seasonality plays a big role, not for everyone depending on their location, but understanding the seasonality trends in cannabis sales, just like any other set of retail sales. Understanding that in your area will help you make those kind of necessary adjustments for staffing, for freeing up capital for inventory, and all those kind of important decisions that you're going to have to make. And also staffing, obviously, that leads me to one of the highest costs for folks. Really understanding your labor costs. Obviously, it's pretty obvious, but it takes a lot to kind of get that on point and get that dialed in. Having the right amount of folks for your peak performance hours, and then not having too many folks on the floor when you're just having those kind of lulls in the day or the week or the season. That's really important to know. Some other ones, just to dig into a little more while we're going into it, category assortment. Category assortment's always going to be very important. Understanding the percentage of sales in your store that's going to a given category, and if you can get the information, category assortment in the state, to help you kind of see how you're stacking up versus the state, will be very important to plan for your inventory purchases, also your sales promotions, and help you figure out that kind of cadence you need for those reoccurring inventory purchases. That will be very helpful as well. And then some KPIs that you should be tracking that I won't go into too much detail because most people will be able to look that up and dig into it more. But for instance, your gross margin is going to be really important. That profit that's left for you to invest in your brand, especially as you're starting out. Really understanding how much you're going to have to reinvest into the business is going to be huge. Cost of goods, your average transaction value, your product mix in store. What are those driver and passenger products? That will really help you with your promotions. Sales per employee, sales per square foot, if your store is set up to really maximize that. And then also those traditional sales versus your online curbside orders. We see since COVID hit, the buying habits of people has changed, and it's not going back to how it was. So really understanding how those shoppers shop, to understand how to better market to them, how to better serve their needs as far as inventory mix and things like that. That's all going to be super important. And there's a lot, I know Joe can probably go into more on the marketing side, because really understanding your customer is going to be the next set of things that's truly important. But I think that's a good overview of some metrics that you really want to be tracking and understanding before you get going. And then as you start rolling, keeping track of it from the beginning.
Definitely. Thank you, Russ. And as you can see, Russ is very knowledgeable on all of those different aspects, and saw him go through from start to finish of all of the things that you need to think about of your planning stage. You can't expect that you're going to gross $1 million until you know of how many people are going to come through, what are they going to spend on each time, what budget do I need on what type of inventory to provide to my store. But I think you really touched on it, is also looking at categories, because there's so many different products that are out there, and finding out of, I only have X number of square feet or X number of shelf space. What is going to maximize for my customers, so I have that product available while not having an opportunity cost by something sitting on the shelf for a long time, or if I bought 20 different types of topicals and I only really need like 2 lotions.
Yeah, totally.
So really, really important to see that. So thank you. So so that's from the retail side. So maybe let's look at from a cultivation standpoint, like what are some of the things from that, or even maybe from a marketing, we can kind of tie that in with some of the things that you wanted to add, Joe.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the marketing piece, may defer to Jocelyn on the cultivation side. But I think, yeah, from the marketing side, I think at Headset, we kind of like to think of it in three, in terms of 3 components. The first being really understanding your customer and your audience who you're marketing to. And the way that we do that is by providing the retailer insight into demographic data. So who is your average customer from a gender perspective, from an age perspective? How many times are they coming into the store? What is their repeat purchase rate? So really kind of understanding your customer and who you're targeting is the first step and the first approach. The second thing we kind of look at in marketing is how can we get that customer to spend more money, and how can we upsell or cross-sell them? So what we do is, in Headset, we analyze their baskets and look at, when this customer is buying X product, how likely are they also to buy Y? And so if you see that products have good synergy and customers are buying those products together, maybe you can offer a bundle deal or a promo or a buy one, get one to ultimately drive larger baskets. So first part, understanding your consumer. Second part, understanding how we can get that consumer to spend more money. And then the third component is really doing like a post-mortem analysis, which is like an after the fact, after you run that promotion, kind of measuring the impact that it had. Was it successful? Was it not successful? Is it worth repeating in the future? And that's also kind of what we give insights into after the retailer has run a campaign or promotion. They can see if, were they driving more revenue, incremental revenue, or were they excessively discounting? Did that eat into some of their margins, and maybe they lost some, maybe it wasn't so successful. So that's kind of the 3 parts that we kind of look at when looking at marketing opportunities. But don't know if anyone else has anything to add. Jocelyn, do you want to speak to maybe the cultivation and manufacturing side?
Yeah. So on the cultivation side, let's just kind of take a step back and think like 10, 20 years ago, a lot of these markets pre-med days, right? You weren't really using any type of, a lot of growers are just growing based off of them knowing how to grow for so long, right? So you're growing a plant and it's a lot of this inherited knowledge. Well, as our industry has matured, technology comes with that, right? So there's a lot of things on the cultivation side that now, as we're doing these large scale grows, that you need to be considering. And technology can kind of help in collecting the data, in helping you analyze the data. So from a cultivation standpoint, you have to make sure the temperature controls, right? Climate zones, monitoring your people going in and out. There's a lot of different things just to make sure the actual grow is going to be as solid as possible or is yielding as much as possible during that harvest. And so there's technologies that are going to now be able to help you do this. Whereas I think about a lot of my grower friends that were coming from the traditional market or still working in the traditional market. Some of them are still using very old school ways of kind of just, having their grow. And we don't have to do this anymore. There is a lot of technology that can help. So this is not as much on our side of the business at Headset. So my knowledge of the cultivation space and kind of the technologies that exist there would be, there's a company called Trim. It's TRYM. And they provide a software that's going to help you kind of collect and analyze all those data points. So it's really focused on the humidity, the climate zone, temperature controls, and making sure that there's a consistency in your grow, because that's where this industry is headed, right? Consumers are expecting consistency, and that's going to start on the cultivation side and making sure that, the flower is as consistent as possible. So that's a very important piece of this. There's a bunch of different tech companies that are starting to get into the cultivation software. Oftentimes it's very different by market and by state or by province. And the reason for this, and Caleb, I'm sure you know, is as each supply chain is different in every state or in every province, we tend to see that some companies, whether they're based in that market or whether they have a better understanding of market, they're going to build products specifically for that market. So if you're doing a grow, I'm based in California. So, doing a grow here might be different than Arizona, than might be different on the East Coast. So really working with those companies that have an understanding of cultivating in your backyard, I think is going to be really important, because they're going to know what data that you need to be tracking.
Yep. And then from an operational standpoint as well, too, of knowing on your supply chain. I mean, you kind of spoke to that, and I definitely have seen that of coming from the start of the industry in pad and paper, and that even getting people to just write stuff down was hard enough, let alone trying to analyze and see of what am I producing? What am I getting per plant? What am I getting in this room? What is my wet to dry ratio? And how am I going to use that to not only with planning on how much product I'm going to have, but also just tracking of how well is my grow happening? Are there spots that this room always does 10% better and it doesn't matter what strain I put in there? These are the things that a lot of it is going to be, you're going to find out as you continue to progress, and you find those partners that are going to help to give you that information so you can make decisions. That's ultimately what it's for, so I'm not operating blind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just one more thing on this, because like being in California and, Joe being in Washington, we have a lot of things in our markets, like the fires, right? Like we have these uncontrollables that are just these environmental changes that are even more of a reason that we need to make sure we're controlling as much of the process as possible. So I see a lot of cultivators here really taking that into consideration. We're going into fire season here in California, and a lot of farms, were destroyed last year during fire season. So being able to kind of control that and account for it, just incredibly important.
Definitely. Yeah, I know up here in Oregon, we got hit with them pretty hard as well.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about different softwares kind of being built from the ground up in the market, I think of Greenbits. They started up here in Portland. It was specifically focused in on the needs of what was going on here, and then it's expanded from there. So I'm definitely seeing that as well. So we kind of touched on this a bit, and I did just mention it about like data being more than numbers, and you're able to make some educated decisions. So what are some of those benefits of a data-driven decision-making mindset? Because it really is a mindset. It's a cultural thing that you have to really drive.
Yeah, I think data really has the power to distill kind of this confusing landscape into something a little bit more actionable and digestible. And I think where that's most evident in the cannabis industry, or at least with the people that I work with, is on the inventory side. The amount of products that an average retailer carries is near insanity. I mean, in Washington, at least, we did an analysis earlier on when I started, and we found that an average retailer was carrying more SKUs than an average Trader Joe's. And I don't know if you guys go to TJ's, but they always strike me as a store with a lot of product, a lot of variety. So, I mean, imagine managing that many products without insight into sell through or top performers or products that are just like lagging on the shelves that you need to get moving out the door. You really can't manage that well. And so I know a handful of retailers that I work with, are still kind of relying on intuition alone, or at least when they first come to Headset when making these decisions. And I don't want to diminish the importance of intuition because I think it provides a lot of value, but I think you need to couple that with data as well, leaning on, those data points to drive better insights and better decisions. But yeah, I think mostly I see that in the inventory side just because it can be so kind of confusing and convoluted to navigate.
Definitely seeing that on inventory. That's one of the tools that I know that I've helped throughout my consulting career, helping to understand the inventory flow, reorder points, DSI, days to sell inventory was a term that I introduced quite a few clients to. And it's just because trying to manage it and balance it is just impossible without having the, and really, I think I want to touch on about that gut feeling is what the data does is it helps to train your gut better. So then you can see, is my gut right? Is this feeling of what I'm seeing? And then you go and you look, you're like, oh, okay. Then I know what areas I can trust myself a little more versus, yeah, I may need to get a second opinion on that. So
I think that's a great point you make, Caleb, because a lot of times the data will help you go with what you already know and help you prove that to maybe people above you. If you're say in marketing and you want to take that to your director, you can see the effectiveness of that marketing campaign with data rather than hunches. For instance, and just kind of going back on how data can really help in decision making, one thing that I always tell people, and I see in a lot of the retailers that I work with, it's always way easier to start from the beginning than to backtrack with it. So for one example, referral sources. Referral sources is something that we see some folks use a lot of different ones, but then I work with some folks who really want to focus that in, and because they're spending so much on marketing, understanding, dialing in how much money is coming from each of these referral sources, using the data to see, okay, this is the average monthly spend based on these referral sources, can help you go back and spend those marketing dollars more effectively. So it's just another example of how that data driven decision making can help prove your point and help you keep going in that direction that you are already headed.
And a referral source, just for clarity, would be something like if someone's finding you from Leafly or Weed Maps or Yelp, we want to track, and that's a referral source is anywhere that a customer is being referred from. One thing I would add on to this, again, I'm gonna, okay, so all of us have been in the industry. Well, Caleb, you've been in it for a lot longer than we have. I think 11 years you mentioned. So I'm 3 years, all of us will say about 3 years. Just in this 3 years at Headset, it is incredible how quickly this mindset is starting to change. And I'll give an example, being here in California, where we're, medical market that's been around since 96. And when you think about a lot of the people that have been running businesses, this is something entirely new, right? Like this is a whole new, like your example earlier, you're not tracking stuff on pen and paper even because you're out of fear that you're going to get arrested. And so it's just a whole different world that we're now kind of educating people on. And one of the things we haven't really touched on is we're talking about Headset and how we help retailers. I just want to clarify this piece because it's actually a really important piece of our evolution as an industry as a whole. what we're doing, we provide a software for the dispensary that pulls in all their point of sale data, and then it's giving them these 50 different reports and visualizations that are helping with inventory management, helping them understand how their sales staff is performing, all their marketing campaigns, et cetera. It's a lot deeper insights than you would get from the point of sale, just because Headset is an analytics company that's been doing this for 6 years. It's all we're focused on. But with that, when I first started working in California 3 years ago, and going out, like what I was tasked with was launching the market in California, which meant going and educating all the retailers on how the software is going to help them. At first, 3 years ago here, and actually all three of us have been working in the Arizona market since, prior to recreational. And there was a lot of hesitancy in wanting to use any software to track your data, to be able to really just this exchange of data, giving someone else access to your data. And I think over the last 3 years, as the industry is maturing and we're having people that are coming in from traditional retail, traditional beverage, and CPG companies, this is just the standard way that any of those operations or any of those businesses are running, right? Because we have to know, like Russ and Joe gave the examples of how important it is for inventory management. One of the things that I think got people to really shift their mindset in California was that a lot of times, because there's so many things going on at a retail store, there would be misplaced boxes. So they would order 200 units of a vape cart, and then they would see it in the point of sale system. Like, I know I have it. Where is this box? And then it'd be in the back room, hidden somewhere under other boxes, and you just misplace things, right? So as we've started to see the industry mature and people kind of change their mindsets to be more receptive to using data, it's because there's these very big things that it's helping with. And these are really simple examples, not misplacing your inventory and knowing that it's somewhere there. And it just gives you that visibility. And so I'm just really happy that the conversation that we're having with retailers today is very different than it was 3 years ago, which is very understandable given everything that people would have to go through just to run a business in this industry. But I say this as a reminder that we are maturing quickly. And so it really benefits you, as Russ is saying, like, start this from the beginning if you can, because the more that you start incorporate, like, everything from here on out in our industry, especially for y'all in Arizona, where this has just happened so quickly for you guys moving into Prop 207, it's only going to get more professionalized. All of these data solutions, this is par for the course. This is the norm moving forward. So it's really to your benefit to just start understanding the ecosystem, understanding all the technologies that exist, understanding the frameworks for data. It's going to put you in a much better position as you go to compete once we move to federal.
Yep. You have to understand your market. You have to understand your business and understand your products. I think it was about 2015, 2016 when I was up here in Oregon, and BDS Analytics was just getting their start, at least in the Oregon market, came in, and it took all of about 30 seconds for me to be like, yes, okay, I'll sign up. Because my background was being in higher education, and we had all of these tools that evaluated for tracking with my students and what was going on with them. And I had that mindset, and that's just how other industries are driven, because businesses have to know where they're spending their dollars if they want to be successful. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So we've talked a lot about inventory. We've talked a little bit about cash, which, of course, with banking and that being a challenge, and that's something that actually has just changed in the last 3 or 4 years of using some of those controls and using data to monitor and track things internally. So how are these things unique to cannabis? I mean, any goods company has inventory. So how is cannabis different, and the tracking requirements different?
Yeah, so I can go into this. So I've only been in cannabis, so I can't speak too much with how tracking is different in other areas and other industries, but I will say the banking thing is huge. Every company I've been with has had to switch up how they do their banking a bit due to the regulations. Hopefully when federal legalization goes, that'll change. But being able to track that internally is going to be crucial because you don't have the same backing of the banks that you normally would. Also, I notice a lot of times, just in my experience dealing with different retailers all over, a lot of times on the inventory side, people rely very heavily on their point of sale to be the end all be all of inventory tracking. And in my experience, that's not the best way to go about it. The point of sales, some of them are great, even from seed to sale. But what they really focus on is keeping you compliant, making sure your stores are running smoothly, making sure it's easy to, if it's seed to sale, get it from one room to the other, to harvest, to package. But you should really be thinking about tracking that inventory in other ways to be able to better see over time historically, for instance, what your sell-through rates are like. If you have multiple locations that you end up opening up, how that changes across and how your category assortment is different across locations. So I think using other tools and not relying so heavily on that point of sale for your end all be all is going to be super important. As far as specific tools for tracking your financials, maybe Josh or Joe could speak better than I could, but I'm not sure of too many just because that's not, Caleb, my area of expertise.
Yeah, this is another one where there's in the ERP solutions, or there's various accounting softwares. And that's where, I mean, if we just think about it, right, a lot of these are still cash businesses. I work with so many companies in all across North America. You know, a lot of these are just how do you keep track of all of your cash when you have a bunch of employees coming in and out? Like, this is a really important thing. And this is where, again, there's technologies and softwares that are really going to be able to help you manage this until we have banking, you know, better banking as an industry. So there's various technologies that are going to help you do this. And one of the things I was thinking, Caleb, is we created this presentation of all the different technologies that you would use on the retail side. And so that will kind of touch on some of that. So maybe we can list out some of those companies.
Yeah, that's great, actually. So for everybody watching, we have a wealth of resources for social equity applicants on MEDA's website. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and link that in that section. And thank you. I appreciate you guys providing that. There's a lot out there. There's a lot. And I really think that you got to understand of what type of questions am I asking, because that is going to help you determine on which software and which one is going to be the right fit for you. Definitely. So we touched a little bit on financials, and I know Russ mentioned kind of a few of them, but what are some of the metrics like for that are unique to cannabis as far as from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, I can take that. I think most of the retailers that I work with are concerned with some of those comparative metrics, like just week over week, month to date, year to date, yesterday versus same day last week. That's what I see a lot of people just kind of looking at and at a kind of bird's eye level view of the company, just to make sure that they're on track. So I think there's a lot of that internal benchmarking, but then I think it's also nice to externally benchmark, so benchmark against the industry, compare your performance at the store within the larger context of the market. And that's what we do at Headset. We also provide some of that benchmarking capability. And from that perspective, I think you want to be thinking about like week over week growth. You want to be looking at basket size, category price points, and product assortment. I think not aligning with the average, though, it doesn't mean that you're not performing well. Like if your average basket is $10 below the market average, you may just be a really high volume store offering products that appeal to a more budget consumer. You know, if you're a very niche retailer that likes to carry brands that are hyper localized and eco-friendly, then you may not get a lot of benefit from benchmarking against like the top 20 brands within the state. So I think there's merit to benchmarking against the industry, but I think that internal benchmarking is really important to keep in mind too when looking at financials.
So a couple of things that I heard there is a lot of it has to do with your positioning and what kind of a store are you looking to run? Where do you see your business in the ranking or in the marketplace is going to determine of what am I going to really be looking at, and how do I look at it as well? Because it's really not just the what, it's the how. So I like that. It's averages.
Right.
That just means half or above and half or below. We tend to forget that if we're not at that average, but just thinking that we're all going to fall somewhere on that bell curve.
Totally. Yeah, we at Headset, we like our box and whisker plots, which may harken you back to the days of 7th grade algebra, but that's where you can see like the 25th quartile and the 75th quartile. So within that range, you can see where 50% of the industry is in terms of basket size or price point. So you're not just looking at the average, you're looking at kind of that range. And if you are outside of that range, that may be, you may be an outlier, and that may be a red flag, but we give you that range so that you can kind of see if if you fit within it.
Yeah, that definitely harked back a bit, but there's a reason why we learned all of those things, is that it's important. It helps you to look at it in a different way. And that actually is a really key insight I want to touch on, of being able to look at yourself in comparative, of not choosing a point, choosing a range. And it's always, if you look at yourself on a Monday versus a Thursday in your metrics, it's going to be different. So I think it's also important to really look at thinking about your time periods, because I used to do that. Tuesdays was always my slowest day. Didn't matter what month, it was always my slowest day. Fridays I knew were going to be probably my busiest, and I didn't have to run a promotion because I was going to have customers coming in anyways because it's Friday. So it's those types of things to kind of be thinking about. Okay, so we're going to touch on a bit with the aspiring social equity applicants. So they're in their planning stages. So they're formulating their businesses. They're deciding what type of company do I want to create. What are some of the important technologies or resources at that stage that you can recommend to the social equity applicants?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to answer this first on the brand side. So being that Arizona is a vertically integrated state, the thing that you all have to think about is you're also creating brands, right? So the first thing you need to know is, what does that landscape look like today? So how many brands are there in the market? What is that category assortment? And so one of the other aspects of our business at Headset is all of our market data. And so this is a platform that we call Insights. This is not yet available in Arizona, as we're not doing a read there yet, but we hopefully will be sometime early next year. But how I would look at this is that first, we need to understand what's going on in the market. So if we know in each market, let's say flowers anywhere from 35 to generally 40% of sales, and this has been shifting throughout the pandemic, and we're seeing this all happen in real time. So we want to make sure we're always looking at what the market is looking like. So then from there, what we want to do is, let's say you're going to make a edible, you're going to do a gummy. So what we then want to do is we want to understand, okay, well, who are all the brands that are competing within gummies? And then we want to look at, well, what does their packaging look like? What does their branding look like? Who are they trying to target? What is their price point that they're selling at? All of this data is available to us as an industry now. And just for everyone to know kind of how we're doing this at Headset, what we're doing is, with all those point of sale connections that we have, we're aggregating all of that point of sale data, and then we're running a bunch of different methodologies to forecast that data up for what the entire state or province is doing. So we have a very good read as an industry. You mentioned BDSA. They're also doing a market read. We have data in terms of the market from ArcView and New Frontier. So there's a lot of companies available to you to understand actually what's happening in your state or your province. But one of the things that we really want to think about as our industry is maturing is there's been this emergence of good, better, best pricing. And this is another framework that you're going to want to understand, because in every other industry, we'll use Marriott hotels as an example in this case. Marriott's going to have their value-based chain of hotels, right? Then they're going to have the mid hotels, that mid price point hotel, and then they're going to have their really fancy hotels, right? But these are all ultimately owned by Marriott. So what they've decided to do is have this conscious decision that, hey, we don't want to just be playing in the luxury premium side of hotel accommodations. We actually want to expand our footprint, drive as much revenue as possible. So we're going to have a luxury chain, we're going to have a mid-sized chain, and we're going to have a value chain. And so they've made this strategy to really be able to touch into all of those price points. And so one of the things that brands, as you're starting to develop this at this early of a stage, it's really understanding who you want to be. In cannabis, it's really hard to play in all three of those buckets at this point. It requires a lot of capital, a lot of internal resources to build these strategies out. And then, of course, all of the technology and data that you're going to need to implement that. But what you can do now is there's a bevy of free resources. At Headset, we provide a ton of them just so you can understand what's happening in the market. And because, again, our industry is so new, I'll give an example in California, just in the last 12-month period, we've had obviously the pandemic, which has had consumer shifts in how people are purchasing and where they're purchasing. We've had the fires where we saw a lot of grows, that got destroyed, and that had an impact. We had riots here. I live in Oakland, and we had 50 stores that were broken into in this area that had a result in, not as much product being available. And so we've had all of these things that we've had to deal with as an industry, and every market has different things like this that they're dealing with that then results in differences in what products are available in the market. So the first thing is really understanding what your market looks like, where you want to play, and then what are going to be those pricing strategies to build your brand, and then analyze the other competitors that you're going to be competing against and figure out like, hey, what can I do different than these companies? And the last thing I would say on this is be authentic. Like, it is so important. Like, we're in an industry where people have a very personal connection to this plant. People have very personal connections as to why they're using cannabis. And one of the things that I see quite often is that a lot of brands don't know who they are or really why they're doing this. There's a lot of companies that are forming out of financial opportunity, which is fine and great. But I think because this industry is such an emotionally driven industry, I just think that is really going to benefit people or companies when you know who you are and what it is that you're trying to do and stay true to that ethos and vision. It's just going to make it a lot easier as you develop out all of your strategy.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. Those are the brands that are having that recognition, that you can see that this is part of either the culture that they're trying to create, and that's part of an internal culture of what type of company do you want to be, and that reflects in your brand. I mean, I read all the rags on the various different industry news and things going on, and there's always new products, and I'm seeing more of that in some of the larger operators. Some of your multi-state operators are starting to have some of that good, better, best option and additional products versus in a newer market like Arizona, for instance. You're not seeing as much of that, but you're absolutely right. We're going to see more of that just as the adult use market matures and grows. So it's we got some exposure in California and in Oregon of kind of things to come in Arizona.
Yeah.
And I think, Caleb, you make a great point. Another thing that folks should be doing is looking at older adult use markets. Oftentimes I hear, well, our state's different. It's not. We see the data, and the data shows that as adult use markets mature, a lot of those patterns are similar throughout markets. So understanding what happened in Washington, understanding what happened in California, understanding what happened in these states will absolutely help to understand where it's going to go in Arizona. Will everything be the same? No, but it'll give you a much better picture of what it's going to mature into.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like there's nuances from every state, and that's why we choose to live in one particular state or the other. But overall, it's the industry itself is going to have some similar trends, and it's important to understand those trends. So thank you, Russ. That was a great ad. Which that leads into great on the next question about tell us some of those knowledge gaps that Headset helps to resolve for operators. Like, I would love to get an example of like, what are some of the biggest like aha moments that you hear from either potential clients, or like that's what makes them realize that they need a company like Headset?
I can kick this off on the producer side and then let Russ and Joe speak to the retail side. Okay, so I was just talking about our market platform insights, right? And what this platform is essentially helping, it's mostly used by product producers at this point, though also investors who are wanting to track the market, and then MSO retailers who have a very scaled footprint. And generally what they're wanting to know is everything that I was just mentioning. So they're wanting to know, what does the competitive landscape look like? How should I price these products? And this is on the retail or the brand side. How would you really know how to price your products in your specific market unless you're going around to all the retailers in that area and being like, okay, well, this brand's pricing at this much. There's no really great way to do that. Well, actually there is. There's this data available now where we can see aggregated state data of what these averages are. So if you're creating a brand, the things that it's going to answer for you is, what does the market look like now? So what percentage of sales is going to flower versus the vape market? How quickly are those categories growing? What does the competitive landscape look like? How many brands are there within it? Because the cannabis industry, much like other industries, there's there's consolidation that's been happening, and a lot of these markets are very, very saturated, and they're often run by a handful of brands. So, for example, I apologize, I'm going to give another California example, but the top 10 brands in California are making up 26% of our sales. And so when we know this, and then we can look at, okay, well, who are those top brands? Then where am I going to be competing outside of those brands? Where are they pricing their products? What discounts are they giving? You know, these are very important pieces of being either a brand or the retailer, because we're always having BOGOs. We're always having these, you know, a Munchie Monday, all these different offers. So we need to know what that looks like in our market and what the other competitors are doing. And so I'll give one specific example. Okay, so throughout the pandemic, or at the start of the pandemic, so, you know, late March, we started to see pre-roll sales decline in most markets. And this makes a lot of sense when we break it down, right? People are concerned about respiratory diseases. People certainly aren't sharing joints. So we started to see the shift from 1 gram pre-rolls. We saw a big decline in those pre-rolls. People were moving over to edibles, which, as we're in lockdown, home with our families, people need more discreet ways to consume. So that was really scary for these pre-roll manufacturers, right? Who are like, oh my gosh, my sales are declining. What am I going to do? I better adapt and figure something else out. So there's a big producer here in California called Sublime Canna. And they were looking at the data and they saw this shift happening. They saw sales declining pretty quickly. And they said, okay, we're going to make a multi-pack. Instead of having a 1 gram pre-roll, we're going to do a pack of 5 mini pre-rolls that people can just consume on their own. So the little dog walkers. Mm-hmm. So these are the things that, as an industry, because it's changing so quickly and we have all of these things happening that are out of our control, we got to be able to adapt to that. And so that's where you're going to use the market data to be able to adjust to those kind of shifts.
Yep, definitely.
Joe,
Russ, did you guys have something you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not really working on the producer, the market data side. I'm really just helping retailers understand their own data sets. Something recently where there was an East Coast retailer who kind of used data in a way to look at customer retention. So customer retention is a big component of understanding your marketing strategy. So if you remember the first part that I alluded to, and understanding marketing is you want to understand your consumer. And within that, you want to understand, okay, out of all the consumers that I have in my store, you know, how well am I retaining existing consumers? And also, how well am I acquiring new consumers? So you want to look at customer acquisition and customer retention. This consumer, or this retailer rather, noticed a drop off in retention at month 4 within the customer's life cycle. And so what they did is they injected kind of like a bounce back campaign at month 4 to kind of incentivize those customers to come back to the store. So that's just one kind of very specific example of how a retailer could use or leverage data to kind of inform maybe their loyalty program or how they're engaging with their consumers. But yeah, that's a very specific example, but just wanted to throw that in there as well.
That's a great one, Joe. And that actually ties back into what Jocelyn was saying at the very beginning about the 80-20 rule of it's going to be about
Mhm.
20% of your customers that are doing about 80% of your sales. Those are your repeats, and you see it that you may have the ones that you get with you do a new customer promotion, you'll get them that one time, but they're the deal hunters. They're the people that will go around town and are going to go and try to find whatever deal is going on, and they don't have loyalty, versus the customers that you know that they come in, it's your regulars. I mean, think about it at
Right.
the restaurant that we're creatures of habit, and we find the places that we feel comfortable going and the people we get along with, and then we keep doing it.
Totally. And even in touristy areas, we see, the bulk of the consumers coming through the door are new customers or visitors, but still it's those loyal customers, that very small percentage of people that are coming frequently, spending a lot of money, that are driving the majority of the revenue. So they have a disproportional impact on the retail operation and are super important to your business and top line. So yeah.
For me, I guess what I could add to this is it's going to depend on the store, and it's going to depend on the situation. But I think with new folks starting out, especially smaller operations, the biggest advantage they get from utilizing Headset is having essentially a tool that will allow them to analyze their retail business without having to hire the big expensive analyst. Being able to, whether it's simply getting a quick daily summary of how your store did, top products that are overstocked, top bud tender, better understanding and being able to automate reports on inventory, such as a reorder report, help with staffing. We just added new bud tender information recently, and being able to better understand how they're selling on sales days. I work with folks a lot who utilize Retailer to quickly figure out who sold the most on this sale day. So those are the most immediate ways that I think folks get use from Headset. And those bigger operations that do have the analyst, what we provide is the ability for them to do the work they're already doing much more efficiently. So we provide tools that will help them run their queries, figure out their marketing campaigns, do their own pivots in Excel. If they have those capabilities, we can provide that data for them without having them spend the time of copying and pasting and downloading and uploading. It's all there at their disposal. So whether you're very small and you just want that daily summary, or you're running 15, 20 stores and you really want to get into the nitty gritty, somewhere in there on the retailer side, Headset can help with it.
Yeah, definitely. That is one thing that I've found. I've used a wealth of POS systems in my career in cannabis, and every single one I had to take a report here, attach it to this one, reference this column, and and that's when I knew exactly what it was I was looking for. So I can only imagine of seeing that, of not even knowing what am I supposed to be looking at, what are those important pieces, and it really and you guys help to paint that picture for them. Definitely. So we're getting here to the end of our time. I wanted to give each of you an opportunity as kind of a sign off, and if there's anything else that you wanted to add to the aspiring social equity applicants out there, I'll open the floor.
I'll go first. I don't have too much. I'm always here as a resource, even if you just want to email me personally, rpowden@headset.io. Happy to answer any questions anyone has, provide you with contacts to people I may know. Super excited to have the time here today. So thanks again, Caleb.
Thank you, Russ.
And likewise, I'm happy to provide any resources or coaching and kind of driving better performance. But I think kind of going back to your first point, Caleb, how can you better read data, or how can you assimilate to the data driven decisions? I think data is great, but it's knowing how to use that data is what's more important. So knowing what questions to ask. I think how I kind of look at it and break it down for retailers who may be a little bit overwhelmed, Because I think one of our common denominators is to succeed and to drive more revenue. And when thinking about revenue, you can really break it out into kind of two components. You can either get more people into the store, or you can get those people to spend more money. And then those two components break out into other components. So to get more people in the store, you can retain your existing customers, or you can acquire more customers. So I kind of like to diagram the kind of total revenue and break it out into its more granular components. And then that kind of gives you a framework to like base a lot of your decisions and questions off of. I've actually diagrammed that framework. I'm happy to provide that as well for the listeners on this call. But I really like to kind of simplify it and distill it to that kind of landscape. But also, you know, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. I'm going to do a shameless plug for Jocelyn and Headset. We're always posting lots of content, industry reports, blog posts. Jocelyn's always posting something like an interesting data tidbit. That's a great way to just kind of get familiar with data and, you know, understanding the right questions to ask. But yeah, thanks for having us on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, those are the things that I would recommend to people. Is there's so much free information out there just to understand what's going on. And so just to rattle off a few, absolutely, Headset, on our website, we have a resources tab. We've got free industry reports, blogs, and data tidbits touching on different aspects of the industry, literally reports that are going to say, hey, this is how you should think about managing your inventory. The point of sale systems do this. BDSA does a ton of webinars and stuff as well. ArcView, New Frontier, just yesterday, if you're interested in the vape market, Green Tank, Headset, ArcView, New Frontier, all major data sources for our industry, published a report on the vape market, which is really insightful. MJ Biz, for me, every morning I'm reading MJ Biz, Ganjapreneur, I'm reading all the publishers to keep afloat of the market. And then you read the data first kind of companies' reports, and they'll give you more insight into each of these different categories. So that's the first thing I would do. And the second thing, you're not alone in this industry. This industry is filled with people that want to help. And so your network is your net worth, full stop. So get out there, network, join every single association or webinar. There's a ton of opportunity to go meet with the community. Arizona in particular has a very strong community. You've got the ADA, you've got META, you've got events that are opening up again. So the key, I think, to being successful truly is leaning on other people in your community that know the things that you don't know, and asking for introductions. And that's the way I think that you're going to be most successful. That's what I do personally. And I just am a huge believer in it. So
definitely. And the trade show circuit is opening back up. So I know that I've seen a lot of those. There's actually 2 in Vegas this year. There's October and then December also. I had the opportunity to go to Earl Cup in Arizona, one of the first actual recreational and medical events in the States, first one after adult use. So that was very awesome to see. And just the industry itself is, if you're coming in with the right energy, you're going to find that people are going to be there with open arms. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. I love the industry, love every day in it. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you to Headset. And definitely reach out. There'll be contact information, and these are going to be up on META's website for viewing. I am Caleb Tice. We want to thank 420 Collections, the sponsor of the META Deep Dive series. And I hope everyone out there got a lot of knowledge here today, and ask questions. That's the one that's what I'll leave you with, is just ask questions. And if you don't know, ask. So thank you.